Fox, and happy Thursday to everyone, and happy 420. My name is Timothy Vilgiotti.
And I'm Christopher Fox.
And you are listening to Two Lies and One Truth,
a neat storytelling podcast hosted on UCCS Radio, iTunes, Google Play Music, as well as a few other podcast hosting localities.
On this show, we bring you 3 stories. Only one of them is true, and it's up to you to decide which one it is.
And you better believe that we will never tell you.
Snitches get stitches.
For show.
Yeah. Well, on this episode, we have stories about weed.
What kind of stories?
Well, we received a few anonymous submissions. Some were too much for us to air. People really like weed out there. So we have accepted some interesting ones, and we'll read them for you. Then you have a story, right, Chris?
Yeah, I wrote a funny one about an ideal first time buying weed.
Your first time?
Nah, I've never smoked weed.
Okay, Sir Blunsalot.
How do you know my gamer tag?
Chris, we just got done playing Age of Empires.
Oh, right. Sorry, I think the weed impacts my memory.
Did you just say that?
Well, moving on, we are trying a new show format this week. 3 stories back to back, 2 back, separated by some tunes by Nick Watros.
First up will be a story read by Jareth Spiria, recent winner of Best Actor in Colorado Springs, Gold. Find him also as Captain Jack at the upcoming Renaissance Fair. The story he will be reading was written by Anonymous. Not the hacker group, but a person that wished their name not to be shared.
After that, we have a story that will be read by Timmy Vilgiotti and submitted by Anonymous. A different anonymous person, or so we think. I don't know. Encryption is weird.
To finish off the show, we have a story read and written by Christopher Fox. Enjoy.
I'll stick around. Tell me you need me, and I'll give ground. Tell me you want me, then I can be found. Until then, I'm next town bound. Looked for you a long time ago, down at the Rio Grande or maybe Tupelo. On the side of Nashville or was it San Antonio? I led an old man alongside the road. I led an old man alongside the road.
Hello, my name is Jareth Spirio. I'm going to be reading a story called An Interesting 72 Hours. It was submitted by an anonymous author. I woke up at 7 a.m. on Friday. I had an 8 a.m. class, and I thought I would at least make an attempt to go. I'm not really sure why. It had been a few weeks since I went to the class. It was pre-calculus. Ugh. When I finally got ready, I was late, but I sat down anyway. Teacher didn't seem to recognize me, but didn't say anything. You see, I'm a kind of person that people look at and talk about later, but they sure don't make any mention of my person while I'm in earshot. Sitting in that class, I remembered why I never came. It was boring. The teacher could have been talking Greek and I might have understood what they were saying more than what they were actually saying. Math is hard. Or at least this math. I can count. I can count eighths, quarters, halves, ounces, grams. Did you know that 28 grams is an ounce? 30 is a European ounce. 14 grams is a half. 7 grams is a quarter. And 3.5 grams is an eighth. Each has its own money valuation. You better believe that I can count money, too. My favorite's counting 20s. 5 20s is 100. 20 20s is 400 or a quarter pound. I got a pretty sweet deal on full elbows. Not the best, but they were all right. I'm sorry. I'm full pounds. That was 110 20s, but when doing that much, it's better just to talk Benjamins, eh? I can count profit, too. at 2,200 a bow, that breaks down to 16 ounces, which is about 137 an ounce. Not the best. The best would be about 100 to 120, but can't skip on quality just for quantity. You lose customers that way. The most I can make in an ounce around here is about 180 to 200, which means a profit of 50-ish to 70-ish dollars per ounce, that is. Which breaks down into 800-ish to 1,100-ish dollars profit per bow. That's not a lot, but I could do it every 2 weeks. What I prefer is to take it elsewhere. Places that up to 180 to 200, they go to 300 to 350, and that's much better profit. It looks about 160-ish to $210 per ounce, which translate to about $2,500-ish to $3,300 profit per bow. And I could never bring enough. I could bring 5 elbows every weekend for a month straight and still never have enough. That's right, I could make $15K profit every single weekend if I wanted. It's just, there's a high risk with that, but sometimes the risk is worth the reward. See? I can count. And daydream time away. Class ended as soon as it began, and I guess going in late helps. And thinking about stuff I actually care about. Money, that is. Thinking about all that through class got me going. So I made some calls out of state and got things in motion. I spent all my money on a recent drug binge, so I called up a close contact and got me an elbow fronted. Came at a higher price, but he knew I was good for it. And if I wasn't, he would kill me, so it really wouldn't matter. I always hated making trips out of state alone, so I called up some friends and asked if they wanted to go on a trip of a lifetime. Of course they did. Who wouldn't want free drugs and the feeling of complete freedom? I spent the better part of that day making sure everything was solid, checked the quality of the items. It was Gucci. All I needed was to wait until night and then go. I hated traveling west through the mountains at night because of animals, but less people would be on the road at the time, and so we'd move quicker. Cops would be more likely to pull us over, but that was a risk we're willing to take. So, night comes, and my friends wanted to check the quality again. They were just using me to get high, but I didn't care. I enjoyed the company. Selling drugs is a lonely life. We smoked in my car, and when we finished, I guess the quality was pretty prime because one of those dumbasses forgot to close his door. We didn't notice, though, but I guess some cops on patrol did. Luckily, everything of major note, outside of our bags, was not in the vehicle itself. So, just before we were going to leave, I got a call from a frantic friend that was going on the trip. He said cops were surrounding my vehicle. Panic mode. No way could they have known about the wait. So we moved to the location off campus as soon as my phone started to blow up from the police. I didn't answer. Everything needed to be secure before I could answer. I also needed to come to terms with the consequences of my actions before I could answer. If they took the weight away, I was dead. If I went to prison, I would probably have been beat up severely or killed due to my cocky attitude. Neither seemed really fun, but seemed like the only choices I had. Once the weight was secured at another location, I came to terms with going to prison. It seemed like I would have a better chance there than having to deal with an angry drug dealer here. Here, this drug dealer would have a gun, and I would have never been seen again. In prison, they would have shanks and other items, but that I figured I had a better chance against. So, summing up the courage, I called the cops back. They wanted to meet at my car, and I agreed. It had been a few hours since first contact, and I didn't know what was going through their minds, and they didn't know what was going through mine. Got a ride back to my car and got dropped off not so far away, just out of sight. Walked up, and there was a person standing guard. Upon seeing me, he questioned me and then called for another car. He left when they showed up. One pretty mean cop walked out and stared me down. Don't think it was what he expected. "You're Mr. And he read off some paper. He read my name. I said, "Yes, sir, I am." I was fully ready in that moment to go to jail, but there was no reason to give myself up. Needed to keep a poker face and find out what they knew. "Well, we were driving by, I saw your door open, and decided to go close it, and it looked like nobody was around. Upon getting within 3 feet of your vehicle, a heavy aroma of marijuana came to my nose. I have to tell you, sir, your car smells the heaviest of marijuana that I have ever smelled in my life. Due to this, I had to search your vehicle, and upon searching, I found these items." Okay, So far, they knew I smoked weed in my car. A lot of weed. They found multiple felony accounts in my friends' backpacks, and they found my information by searching the vehicle. I said nothing, and the cop continued. Are, these items yours? No, sir. That's what we thought. Well, we'll just go ahead and get rid of these items. You have a good night, and, work on the smell in your car. We just wanted to make sure no harm came to your person. I was dumbfounded. I had always heard that being white came with privilege, and I was seeing it right in front of my eyes. They let me go. I got in my car as the cop watched. I drove away, picked up my friends, drove to where the weight was, bought some Adderall for the drive, took that, and started off to sell the weight some 14 hours away. Leaving at 1 a.m. would make us arrive near 3 p.m. We could have the weight off our hands by 8 p.m., and then the rest of the night would be free to party before heading back home for school. The others actually went to class sometimes, more than I did. I was just here in the moment, enjoying the easy money, the easy flow of drugs. I hated the loneliness of it all, though. 7 p.m. on Saturday came, and I was right. Everything went quick. Kept enough to stay high all night and through the drive home. Also found some more Adderall to stay awake through Saturday. Always was able to drink a lot more when I took Adderall. Saturday night, we hit up a few parties. My friends left me at 1 because I was talking to a foreign chick. Hooked up with her before I met back with my friends to go home. That was at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning. I've been awake since 7 a.m. on Friday thanks to Addie, and I drove home, money in hand from another successful and eventful weekend. I even got laid. Got home around 6 p.m. and was finally able to calm my mind down enough to sleep by 9. I was up the whole time. For the better part of Sunday, I was hallucinating during the drive. I tried to get one of my friends to drive because I was tired of seeing stuff run across and around the road. He lasted about 30 minutes before he couldn't do it anymore. So I took the wheel back. Worthless people. Why did I even bring them along? I mean, they almost got me caught and put in jail. Took my drugs for free and didn't even hang out with me at the parties. And couldn't even drive a car. I know they had more sleep than I did, but whatever. Hallucinating it all, I got us home. Never really spoke to them again. But, I mean, hey. At least it was a fun weekend.
Beautiful, untouchable thing. It breaks my heart knowing I could have been showing you true love me. Now I'm cutting the strings, no longer be your puppet of unfulfilled dreams. Beautiful, untouchable thing. I hope someday you'll see the love before you and let it hold you. Beautiful, untouchable thing. Beautiful, untouchable thing.
Hello, my name is Timothy Vilgiati. I'm going to be reading a story written by one of our anonymous submitters. And here we go. I was 9 years old. There were 8 older siblings before me, and at the time, 7 of us were still living on the farm with our parents. This 64-acre farm was inherited by my father from his parents, and my grandfather bought the land after he collected insurance money from a construction accident he had, which led to the loss of one of his eyes. I never met my grandfather, but he always sounded like a great man. He was intelligent and inventive, just like my father. My father built our house from scratch while simultaneously raising 5 kids and holding a job in the city, which was an hour away from the farm. At this time, my parents also held the weight of caring for my grandmother, who was dying of brain cancer. And beyond this, there were other responsibilities like tending to our livestock and harvesting food from the garden. My father was sometimes gone for weeks, even months at a time due to the nature of his job. He was an electrical engineer and worked for a company that had him install ion implanters for laboratories all around the world. He would come back home to a partially built structure that was mostly walled by plastic sheets. He had no written plans for how our house would be structured. Every now and then, He'd just add a little more here and there, going with his creative flow. Many people seem taken aback when they first see our house. Some have said it looks like a Frankenstein house. The building process never actually did become finished. Only one half of it is currently livable. And the other half, which was left semi-exposed to the outside, is now deteriorating with the weather and is commonly occupied by feral cats and various rodents and reptiles. My father eventually became too fatigued of being away from his family for such long periods of time, and it was especially hard on my mother as well. He didn't like the idea of continuing to work in a cubicle either. He just wanted to be in nature on the farm with his family and tending to his garden. He had a plan to feed his family, a plan that would allow him to finish, or mostly finish, building the structure that would shelter us. My father left his job in the city and started planting more valuable crops. These crops were green and prosperous in more ways than one, if you know what I'm saying. Crops that were bound for expansion and highness, if you catch my drift. Crops that were marijuana, if you know what I mean. Sure, he had kids running around, and that presents the risk of losing custody if anything might happen to them, especially given that this is Texas. But my father didn't think anything would happen to him. He's actually a very ballsy guy. To him, he is his own sovereign being. No government has entitlement to rule what seeds he plants in the earth or what kind of smoke he breathes. The only laws he abides to are the laws of physics and the moral laws that teach us to be good to one another. And my father was a very successful cannabis farmer. He grew, harvested, and profited from the crop for over 2 decades. Our crops were rumored to be one of the main sources that supplied the city and the surrounding areas of central Texas. But it's not like my father was a millionaire or anything. My parents are pretty nice folks to their distributors and always cut them good deals. They also gave a lot of weed away to their friends, and they just smoked a lot of it themselves. Most of the profits just went to keeping up the farm and paying for the needs of a family of 9 children. All of us kids were homeschooled as well, so money had to go into paying for school supplies. Our parents just really didn't want to put us through public school. They seemed to both have had pretty bad experiences with it, and they just didn't want us to absorb the cultural mindset that was shared throughout the rural area where we lived. People were and still are pretty racist, misogynistic, and overall just really regressive in their thoughts and opinions, especially about things like the devil weed. Looking back, I think the main reason why we weren't put through public school is because my parents were afraid of one of us accidentally telling someone about what kind of plants we grew on our farm, ultimately getting my dad in trouble. Growing up, I was often told by non-immediate family members that I had a very non-conformist childhood, and that so many people would be envious for the lifestyle I had growing up. I got to run wild on the land, and had a very non-structured schooling. I don't think my parents even knew where I was most of the time. The only obligations I had were to help tend to the animals, occasionally cleaning up the house and working in the garden. Not that garden, of course, but our vegetable garden. So much time was spent there digging up dirt for potatoes and pulling weeds. It was a good childhood now that I look back, but I didn't realize it then. I didn't have anything else to compare it to because I knew of no other lifestyle. We were pretty sheltered kids, albeit unintentionally. Some of the older kids had their own methods of socializing, whether that be ballet lessons or whatever means they had that gave them a social outlet, but some of us didn't really get those opportunities. My father was a huge hoarder. He'd collect tons of junk from auctions. This junk consisted of various electronic instruments and cars, and huge nose cones of airplanes that you could see spread all over our farm. My father always thought he'd put the stuff to use one way or another, thinking that he would be able to salvage any precious metals from the old electronics or perhaps use some of the stuff for one of his many inventive engineering side projects. One collection he brought home from the auction were 15 mobile trailers. All of these trailers, with the exception of 3 or 4, my father stuffed to the ceiling with the other junk he'd hoarded from these auctions. The rest of the trailers became occupied by any of the kids who decided they wanted to move out of the house, mainly because there wasn't enough room with so many kids being made. One morning, I woke around the usual time of 10 a.m. and looked out my window to see a policeman walking down the pathway to our house. I got scared. I woke up my older sister, who was on the top of the bunk bed, to tell her. She got freaked too. From our window, the upstairs window, we could see at least 2 police cars out in our gravel driveway. Our parents were out there talking to the police. My sister and I snuck around the house and we tried to gather and dispose of any pot baggies or roaches that were laying around. There were too many. We didn't know what to do. We woke up our older brother, the only other kid still living in the main house. I can't quite remember how we all ended up walking out into the driveway, but I think our mother gathered us, probably accompanied by a policeman. Our parents always gave us the impression to never trust the police. I don't think I really knew how objectionable the cannabis lifestyle that my family lived was at that age. I just knew that my father grew cannabis, and that was illegal. I remember it was spring and the air was cool. There were maybe a dozen or so government officials in my sight, either talking in groups with one another, talking to my father, or walking around the property. One of the policemen was assigned to watch us 3 kids and my mother. They had us all sit in the back of my mother's pickup, since there was nowhere else for us to sit. The policeman was a black guy who talked a lot. He seemed hyper alert and slightly afraid, while at the same time had a condescending attitude towards us kids. The search lasted probably a little more than 5 hours. They chopped down my father's crop and seized any of the plants that were hung up for drying, along with whatever boxes or baggies of pot they found in any buildings on the property. At some point, my mother asked the officer that let us kids sit inside the car to put on the air conditioner because it was getting so hot outside. In the car, our mother told us that she didn't know what was going to happen, but that our father was probably going to jail. We listened to an entire album of Bob Marley until the operation looked like it was wrapping up outside. Our mother rushed to hug our father, and the police all gave us a chance to briefly hug him too. They cuffed him and ushered him into the car. It was later learned that 2 of my brothers were also arrested. Evidently, the police decided not to involve CPS. Probably because there are so many kids to deal with. After this event, we were the talk of the catty little town. People ostracized us completely, even my father's entire side of the family. They didn't want to associate with someone who lived such a contemptible lifestyle. Because of the slow process of the courts, it would be 3 years before my father would be seen for a sentencing hearing. My brothers had their hearings first, and ended up getting their cases dropped. "You better thank the Lord you're a white man," my father's lawyer once told him. My parents were always optimistic and always thought my father might get off easy. Maybe even have his case dropped as well, given that the police had done some shady and questionable legal things regarding how they coerced my father and searched our property. The morning of the hearing, we had loads of family and friends at our house who would be there to show support for my father. The party we had is almost a blur now. I just remember the work we put into cooking the food and cleaning the house for that party, and all the optimism we felt. Looking back, it does seem like there was a disconcerting feeling in the faces of our less immediate family, and in the face of my father's lawyer. At the courthouse, there were even more people there to show support for him. My father's high school math teacher was there. He was so old, and he looked so fragile, but was so happy to see my father and be showing support for him. He was the first person to visit my father in jail, which took away the chance of visitation from any other person that day, leading my mom to drive back home disappointed. I just remember the boredom on the face of the judge as he heard each side. My mother prepared to read in front of the judge the pages upon pages where she wrote about what a good man my father is, but she was interrupted with miscellaneous questions, and she wasn't even allowed to finish it. I just remember zoning out from all the wariness caused by all the legal chatter and looking at the grossness of the judge's face, all of his moles and saggy skin. He was obviously bored with it all, probably thinking about how he'd rather be golfing. The fatigue in his face was magnified by his sagging cheeks. The gavel dropped loudly. "I hereby sentence you to 10 years in prison." My mother let out the most painful wail that will forever stick in my memory. Everyone in support of my father stood up and tried to gather near him, crying out for him. My father stood stoically as the officers cuffed him and ushered him away. The pain and helplessness I felt then was indescribable. It was a weight, a doom that crushed my mind, my heart. I cried like the rest of my family, but no matter how much I cried, the force of tears couldn't relieve me of the utter devastation that my father, the most virtuous, intelligent, and loving man I knew, had been confined from the world, his life, and his family.
If you're getting tired of the same old song, you're the patient to settle down. This night just might be your night. Trust me, girl, your little world ain't all that's going on. Step outside, post a slice of light, 'cause tomorrow I'll be gone, I'll be moving on. I'll be moving on.
Everyone has their firsts. It wasn't too long after I had my first kiss that I smoked my first cigarette. I found it an easy way to calm down if I was too hyper. Relax. It was nice. It also wasn't too long after I smoked weed for the first time that I tried alcohol. Also, for the first time. It stated that weed is a gateway drug. I just think life is a gateway drug. Programs like DARE got me pretty, interested into drugs. I thought it was amazing that you could experience things that push the veil of reality. Needles have scared me my entire life, and I've never wanted to do anything too crazy, but everyone has their firsts. And I think most of us remember our firsts. Maybe not the first time we ate ice cream or anything superficial like that, unless you really love ice cream, but we remember the big stuff. Our first kisses. First real girlfriends. The first car. I think we remember those things. I remember the first time I got and smoked weed. I was so young. I had been smoking cigarettes for a little bit, and getting calm was interesting, but I wanted a bit more. Honestly, I wanted to hallucinate, but that would have to wait about 7 years. So, my first time buying weed, it almost didn't even happen. We got a new seating arrangement in class, and I spoke to a girl I had never spoken to before. But let me back up and say that this was in 8th grade. 8th grade social studies, to be more specific, and I had to talk to some people around me. I spoke to this girl that I had never spoken to before in my life. It turns out she liked drugs. Knew a lot about them. She had a lot of life experiences, actually. She had a boyfriend, and they've been dating for a little bit, but he got himself into some trouble. Well, a lot of trouble. He actually got himself into jail. So her and her friends were working on bailing him out, and they were trying to raise $75,000 to get him bailed out. Thinking about it now, that guy had to have been over 18 to land in jail and was dating an 8th grader. But, moving on. No, wait. They had to get $75,000? Why did I talk to her? I didn't even know what she was involved in. It had to be gang-related. I didn't know, but I guess I just thought it was cool. I thought that she was cool. This rebel of a girl who was pregnant. I mentioned she was pregnant, right? Well, yeah, she was pregnant, and the dad of the child was in jail with a $75,000 cost to get him out, and she would always wear baggy clothes and hope no one would notice. She didn't want anyone to know, and I couldn't imagine what she was going through, but I didn't care at the time. She had an expansive life experience by the 8th grade that went, and probably still goes far beyond what most people experience in their entire lives. Our conversation quickly turned to how they would raise the required funds. Like, that's a lot of money. She said that her and her friends were selling drugs. I didn't know too much about anything else, and I asked if I could get some weed. She laughed and said, "Yeah, how much do you want?" I thought about it, and I had a quick access to $30, so I said about that much. She laughed again and said that she would break me off a bit of one of the bricks. I said all right, and that I would have the money for her the next time we had class. This was pretty close to my birthday, and so I was going to have weed for my birthday party. You ever go back on your life and think about the pivotal moments during it? This was a pivotal moment. I started a decade-long love affair that I've often wished I never had. Now, the next class period, I mentioned that I had the money and if she had the weed, and she laughed and said yes. So I handed her the money in class, and she says that she will give it to me afterwards. I say okay, and try not to think about it anymore, but, how could I not? I was getting something that I had wanted to do since those elementary school dare videos. It was exciting. I was going to be like a really cool rebel and do my own thing. End of class. I couldn't be any more excited. Like, how are we going to do this? Go meet up outside? Would one of her friends or her boyfriend's friends come and it be just like the movies? Would I get to meet some gangsters? She said walk with me. And we started to walk into the hallway. She made small talk and then started to walk away. I said, "Hey, what about..." She cut me off. She said, "Check your pocket." There it was. In my pocket, she slipped a bag in. I went to the bathroom to check it out, and it was a lot. Actually, in retrospect, I got ripped off, but it was a lot at the time, like a lot of weeds. I didn't even know what to do with it besides separate out the stems and the seeds, and I couldn't even do it then. Oh, and it smelled so bad, or really good. I couldn't tell. I put it in my bag and just hoped I could make it through the rest of the day. Now, skipping ahead a bit, I did. I made it through the entire day with no problems, because I was a really good white kid. And I smoked it with some people on my birthday. I got high as balls and fell in love. Now, very few things in my life have ever made me feel like that, and most of them have been drugs. Like, people have had their moments, but mostly people are shitty. When classmates found out that I was smoking, they backed away from me. I lost my best friend of 5 years, and I lost a lot of contacts. No one wanted to talk to me, which I should note in 4 or 5 years when everyone went to college. Most of those same people went nuts on partying, and I was pretty much over by then. Well, sort of. I raged way hard, but that's a story for another day. And needless to say, there were some really nasty trade-offs I had from smoking weed that I already mentioned, but my school grades improved. So much so that my dad stopped beating my ass and admitted that what he'd been doing hadn't been working. Whatever I was doing was, so I should just keep it up. I laughed. Everyone has their first. Most times people will regret their first, and looking back on this, there have been times that I have, but ultimately I don't regret it. I matured to drugs earlier than most, and I was able to initially handle the pressures by the time I got to college. Well, that is until I found acid, but that's a story for another day.
Not sure I'm going, but I know where I've been. Not going back there, inside my head again. Sometimes my thoughts get muddled up inside, but I see clearly on these Colorado nights. I see clearly on these Colorado nights. It's time to love, it is real. Starts this restlessness I feel.
Upcoming show themes are parties, and then things are going to get really weird as we take on the show theme of paranormal, and then school, all in honor of finals week, or the end of finals week. After that, we have the theme of hope, something which I lost a long time ago. I'm just kidding.
Currently, our website is going under some maintenance by this guy, so just chat with us on Facebook.
Thanks, Nick Waltress, for letting us use your music. I will definitely play mandolin for you in the future. We really appreciate it. Nick Waltress is a great guy. You should definitely check him out on Facebook. It's Nick Waltress, and let me get the spelling of that. It's NICWATROUS. He is a great musician, great singer, great member of the Colorado Springs music community. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Have fun.